Larry King, who recently passed away, said, "I have never learned anything while I was talking." When I remember when I first joined the Medellin Drug Cartel, I was just a 20-year-old punk. When I took over operations, I was 21 years old. And one thing that my godfather said to me, he said, "Son, remember two very, very important things. You can learn from anyone in this world if you're willing to listen. But more important, you need to realize that not even the fish will be caught if he kept his mouth shut." The truth of the matter is that I lived and adhered by those two principles. See, I used to live in a world where people really listened to their elderly. For me, I had the greater incentive that I was listening to a very, very powerful man. A man that took me as his own son. A man that taught me principles that I never ever dreamed of. A man that taught me and supported what my father had taught me about integrity. So much to the point that he said, "Son, nobody dies for telling the truth." Think about that. You know, when I tell people that in the cartel, people used to owe me millions and millions of dollars, and everybody paid. Sometimes people would drop off bags by our office. I didn't have time to count it then. It might be a week before I counted it. $1 million, $2 million. Sometimes it'd be short $20,000. Sometimes it'd be over $30,000. The truth of the matter is that whatever I told them was, they would adhere to it. And everybody repaid. When I tell the story, people say, of course everybody would pay, because if they didn't pay, they would die. My response was, really? Must we threaten to kill people to make them honest? So when I looked and listened to those principles about listening, I began to realize that, perhaps the reason that we live the life that we live is because we're not listening to people. We just rub them off. As we look at our political climate, and I refused as of the beginning of the year to even talk about politics anymore. Today I waste my time looking at YouTube videos on how to become a better cook with my wood oven. But anyways, I tell people, it does not matter what the opposite party says or the opposite leader says. We discard it just right off the bat. Why? Because we don't care. We hear them, but we're not listening. We're not learning what their pain is. We're definitely not learning what the pain of the American people is. We're not learning what the pain of the world is. We're just so self-consumed with our desire. And for those that love conspiracy theories, you know who they will listen to? The fish that feeds that conspiracy. Truth is that if we're willing to listen to either party, perhaps we could do something better for America. But if we're willing to listen to our parents, perhaps we won't make the same mistakes. I tell my children all the time, listen, for a minute, don't think that what I'm telling you is because I am a genius. By no means, I'm a screw up. I'm not a success. I've succeeded in life, but that's very different than being a success. Think about it. I have failed at 3 marriages before I finally found the love of my life, and before I finally was willing to listen to God to tell me to wait and be celibate to find the woman that He had created for me. Seems silly, huh? It even seems more silly for a guy that was a confessed atheist. But I tried everything the world had to make me happy. So I figured, why not give this a shot? And I would listen. I was willing to listen. I listened to the Bible as I read it, not by no means as a religious book. How could I? I didn't think God existed. I thought all of that was crazy. But I began to read it first as a historical book. You want to hear amazing war stories? Read the Bible. Read the Old Testament. You want to listen and learn amazing morals? Read the Bible. So I began to do that, and I began to listen to what I was being told, and I actually started to change my thinking about life and about many, many things. We look at our children today, and my God, they are such a disadvantage. Twofold. Number one, their fault, but number two, our fault. Unfortunately, our children don't get to sit by the foot of the elder. And they don't get to listen to the stories of what made them successful or what made them fail at different things in life. Mainly our fault, because we just don't have the time to sit there and talk to them. See, I made it a point. When you look at my children and you see how successful they are, and you say, wow, how can that be? I mean, think about it. I spent 10 years of my life. By the time my older son was 13 years old, I had been in prison 10 years. His first 5.5 years, I was out for 3.5 years, and then his last 5 years. So probably about 14, 15, I've been in jail for 10 years. But I made a point to have my parents and my brother, who God bless him, who sacrificed his whole life to bring my children and my parents so that they could see me. And I would sit there for hours and talk to my children and tell them stories and tell them about my experiences so that one day maybe they won't make the same mistake. But we're too busy right now, right? Because we think that we need to get busy to work so hard so that we can give our children what they truly don't want. All they want is our presence. We're just not willing to give it to them. And then when it's too late and we see them realize and make the mistakes that they make, it's not their fault. It's our fault. We didn't teach them. That's our number one responsibility as a parent, is to teach our children in the ways of life. So many times, different parents who have suffered the loss of their child to suicide, and it breaks my heart. And I don't say nothing to them. But they go on to tell me, Dr. Valdes, I never saw it coming. Really deep down inside, I want to scream. I say, you didn't see it coming? Or you were just not listening and seeing it coming? Because no child gets up early in the morning and says, what a wonderful day today. It's sunny. Or today's an ugly day. I'm just going to take my life. There are many, many, many signs. But we're just not willing to listen. And that's a problem today. We're not willing to listen to those that have succeeded in life and ask them how. I'm very excited today that we live in a world where there's all this coaching going on. And perhaps through that coaching, we learn from people, not because they were born with that, knowledge, but because throughout their life experiences, they have acquired that knowledge. When I talk about what happens in a business when you're absent, it's because I know what happened when I was absent from one. When I tell people what happens when you sacrifice, I know what it is. When you stay focused on the end goal, I know what it is. Not because I learned it in some book. It's because I lived it. And sometimes, many times, when people say, well, why don't you look at and know even that the word failure exists in your vocabulary? I have failed many times. But see, to me, my mindset tells me I'm not a failure. My mindset tells me that it's just another experience. And when that experience costs me money, well, you know what? College costs a lot more. The question is, if I listen to the mistakes I made, or if I listen to others who told me how I made a mistake, and I do it again, I'm just plain stupid. So, like Larry King, who just gave more interviews than anyone in the world and never read an author's book before he interviewed them. Because he knew one thing. He was willing to listen. But most of the time today, we don't want to listen. We want to speak. We don't want to be heard. We don't want to hear people. We want to be heard. Truth of the matter sometimes is that we just need to pause and listen, even with those that we disagree wholeheartedly. Perhaps somewhere in there, we learn something about them. And perhaps somewhere in there, we realize why they believe how they believe. It's a very, very tough world out there, my people. So I'm telling you today, take it as an advice. Listen. Try to learn and listen from those that are closest to you, or even from mentors, or even for other business leaders that have succeeded. Even your boss. Sometimes invite them to a cup of coffee, or invite them to lunch and say, hey, I just want to listen. I just want to hear how you got to where you got. Can you help me? I promise you, 9 out of 10 people love to share their experiences. I'm very excited that we're creating a community. We're creating a membership program where every month we're going to deal with different principles that would help us develop that ultimate mindset. And part of that ultimate mindset is listening. Listening to what we are taught with an open mind. Because there's a difference between listening and hearing. We can hear people, but we don't listen to them. And I know my wife many, many times says, I hear you, but I'm not listening when I say some things that are just plain stupid. So I'm excited. I get so many requisitions and I just can't answer the many, many emails I get every day. I cannot, coach the many, many people that ask me. But through this membership program, as I develop other different programs, it'll be fun. We're going to meet once a month and we're going to create a community of like-minded people. Not like-minded that we all think like a robot or identical. No, like-minded that we want to succeed. That we're not happy by the decisions we've made in our life. We're not happy by the way we're seeing the world. We're not happy that we keep making the same mistake over and over again. We're not happy with the mindset that we now have. We want to create that ultimate narco mindset that gives us power, that helped me succeed, that allowed me to go into prison after losing every penny I had at the age of 36, not having a dollar to buy a candy bar, and look at it and said, I'm not in prison, I'm in a monastery. And however many years I got left, I will come out a much better person. I did. I taught myself Greek. I learned another degree. I started my master's when I came out. And I remember my counselor saying to me, George, why are you leaving? Don't you realize you're a legend here? Everybody respects you. You got clothing, housing, food. Nobody calling you to ask for nothing because you got nothing to give. You got everything here. And I just responded by saying, he finished by saying, and you know what? Who's going to hire you? You're a twice convicted drug dealer. I thought about that for a minute and I quickly responded. I said, that Bible I've been reading tells me that God will grant me favor before kings. He quickly responded, yeah, but there's no more kings in America. I said, yes, there are. The President of the United States is a king. 3-4 years later, I had White House clearance. Why? Because part of that listening was that I needed to come clean about my life and admit the sins in my life. See, America is tremendous in crucifying people who make a mistake. But what makes America greater is that it's willing to redeem you. That when you redeem yourself, it's willing to forgive you and give you another shot and look beyond your past. It's only when you don't want to come clean and you want to keep hiding and making excuses for the asshole, the moron that you've been, that you know what? America's pretty tough on you. But this, for me, I know, because I have been granted favor like I've never imagined. I have friends in the highest offices of business, government, in foreign countries. I have met some of the most amazing people in the world. It all started with me one day saying, you know what? I don't want to live in that hidden sin anymore. I don't want to, every time someone looks at me, think that they know my past. See, when I wrote Coming Clean, there was no Google, what I call today the big snitch. So people, in reality, didn't even need to ever find out about who I was. I had just finished a Ph.D. and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to disappear and teach at a university far away from Miami where no one ever going to know me and just have a bunch of people begging for an A. What a life. But the truth of the matter is that it was crucifying me. Every time someone said something, every time someone sent a letter that I didn't know, I'm like, oh man, they know, they're going to tell. I wrote Coming Clean. It was tough. It was telling my kids that I was a horrific sinner, that I was a horrific person, that I was an adulterer, that I was a pornographer, that I was a drug dealer, but that I had repented and I was willing to change my life. And I was willing to work to make this a better world, not to erase the wrongs I had done. Nothing will erase that. Only death will erase that. But the truth of the matter is that I'm not defined by my past. I'm defined by who I am today and where my heart is and how I hurt for those that are hurting. How I feel for the incarcerated, abandoned men, young women, and children. People given a life sentence because they had nothing to give. I had millions to give and I got 10 years. There's so many people that have never seen $10,000 doing life in prison. I hurt for them. So I have a mission to send my book so that at least it would give them hope. Because that's the biggest thing in prison. They're dying for lack of hope. See, I also learned that in the Bible. As I read the scriptures, they told me, one day God said, my people are dying because of a lack of hope. I was there for 10 years. I had hope. I had a great family. I knew that I would come out, I would study, and if I worked real hard and sacrificed tremendously, I could become a teacher one day, which originally was always my passion. And it's a vision I have for my daughter, my oldest daughter, who she is now, an amazing teacher. So I did. I sacrificed. I made it. And I've been respected because no matter what I've done, I got 3 letters after my name, Ph.D. So today, people, I urge you, listen. Listen more than what you speak. Sometimes we just don't need to say what we need to say. Invest in the life of your children. Speak to them. Sit them down. Talk to them. Have a conversation. Go on a date with your daughters, one-on-one. Share your heart, your pain. Explain to them how you disrespected women that just weren't willing to respect themselves. Without an excuse. It's not an excuse. but how you respect their mother so much because she wasn't willing to give up the only thing that she had, her purity. So as we go on to next week, my message is real simple. Listen twice as much as you talk. You can learn from anyone, just willing to be listened. And also remember, not even the fish be caught if he kept his mouth shut.